I know the weight you carry tonight. I see you in the hour when everyone else has found their peace, and you sit alone with a question that burns in your chest. Why does the silence feel heavier than the noise ever did? Why does the empty room echo louder than any crowd? I have been where you are now. I have sat in a room in Kenya, watching the candle flame tremble, feeling my prayers dissolve into smoke before they could rise. I have known the particular ache of waking to realize that the person you built your life around is gone, that the habit you swore you left behind has returned like winter, that the promise you made to God and yourself lies broken at your feet. I am Rumi, and I am speaking to the part of you that has grown tired of pretending. There is a way through this, not around it, not over it, but through it, and it begins in the last place you would think to look. I learned something in my darkest season that still guides me when the path grows dim. I learned that strength is not the absence of trembling, but the decision to remain present while you tremble. The world teaches you to fear silence, because silence reveals what noise conceals. But I tell you this, as one who has walked through the valley you now cross, the silence you fear is not your enemy. It is the first honest friend you will meet on this journey. When my beloved teacher Shams of Tabriz vanished from my life, when the world I had built around his presence collapsed into dust, I thought the silence would kill me. I paced the streets of Kenya like a madman, calling his name into empty alleys, searching every face in the marketplace for the one I had lost. The noise of my searching was a shield against the truth I could not bear to face. And then one night, exhausted beyond exhaustion, I stopped running. I sat in my room and let the silence enter. It came like a wave, and I thought I would drown, but I did not drown. I floated. And in that floating, I heard the voice I had been running from, my own, not the voice of my plans or my fears or my wounded pride, the voice beneath all that. The voice that simply said, I am still here. I am still breathing. This breath is mine. This moment is real. And God is present in this silence, closer than my own heartbeat, waiting with infinite patience for me to stop long enough to notice. Here is the truth the world will not tell you because it profits from your distraction. Your pain is not a problem to be solved immediately. Your grief is not a disease to be medicated into numbness. Your loneliness is not evidence of your failure. These are the rooms through which you must walk to reach the place where your true self waits. The silence of pain is not the absence of God. It is the presence of God without interference, without the static of 1,000 competing voices telling you who you should be and what you should feel and how quickly you should heal. In the silence, the wound can finally speak its truth. In the silence, you can hear what you have been too afraid or too busy to hear. In the silence, God does not shout instructions. God breathes with you, one breath at a time, one moment at a time, one small decision at a time. This is not the path of the hero who conquers all in a single dramatic gesture. This is the path of the pilgrim who learns to take one faithful step, then another, trusting that the road will reveal itself beneath your feet. I want to give you something practical, something you can hold in your hands today. Not a grand philosophy, but a small key. Tomorrow morning, or whenever your day truly begins, I want you to find 3 minutes. Just 3. Set them apart as holy time. Sit in a chair or on the floor. Close your eyes if you can, or soften your gaze if you cannot. Place your hand over your heart. Feel it beating. This is not poetry. This is your body, your actual living body, telling you that you are here, you are alive, you are held by something larger than your fear. Breathe in slowly through your nose for a count of 4. Hold for a count of 1. Breathe out through your mouth for a count of 6. Do this 5 times. Do not try to fix anything. Do not try to feel peaceful or holy or transformed. Just breathe. Just notice. Just allow the silence to be what it is. A space large enough to hold your pain without judgment, without hurry, without false comfort. This is how the healing begins, not with a lightning bolt of insight, but with a willing breath, not with a miracle from heaven, but with a small act of mercy toward yourself. When the 3 minutes end, open your eyes. Whisper these words aloud, even if your voice shakes. I am here, I am breathing, God is with me. Then stand and meet your day. The silence will have done its work, even if you cannot yet see the fruit. Let me tell you what happened to me when I began this practice. At first, nothing. At first, only the noise of my own mind shouting its usual complaints and terrors. But I stayed. I returned the next morning, and the next, and the next. Slowly, so slowly I almost missed it, something shifted. The silence stopped feeling like a threat and began to feel like a refuge. The 3 minutes became the most honest part of my day. In those minutes, I was not Rumi the scholar, not Rumi the poet, not Rumi the man who lost his teacher and his way. I was simply a soul breathing in the presence of God. I was simply a heart learning to trust that the ground beneath me was solid even when I could not see it. The thoughts still came, the pain still visited, but I was no longer drowning in them. I was watching them from a slight distance, the way you watch clouds move across the sky. They came, they passed, and I remained. And in that remaining, I began to remember who I was before the world told me who I should be. I began to hear the voice of the Beloved speaking not in words, but in the quality of the silence itself. A silence that was not empty but full. A silence that was not abandonment but embrace. A silence that said, I have always been here. You were the one who was lost in the noise. Welcome home. Here is the paradox that will guide you if you let it. What silence reveals, noise conceals. The world will tell you to fill every empty moment with distraction, with productivity, with anything that keeps you from facing the raw truth of your own heart. But the path to peace runs through the center of your pain, not around it. The path to strength runs through the admission of your weakness, not the pretense of your competence. The path to God runs through the valley of your own humanity, not the mountain of your spiritual ambition. I learned this not from books, but from nights when I had no choice but to face what I had been running from. I learned this from mornings when I woke with nothing but a breath and a prayer, and the faint stubborn hope that today might be different if I could just stay present for it. And it was different, not always dramatically, not always immediately, but steadily, like the sun rising degree by degree until suddenly the room is full of light and you realize the darkness was never permanent, only patient, waiting for you to stop fighting it and start walking through it. So I leave you with this practice and this promise. The silence is not your enemy. Your pain is not your prison. Your breath is not nothing. It is everything. It is the thread that connects you to this moment, this life, this God who has never stopped breathing life into your lungs, even when you forgot to say thank you. Return to the silence daily, not because you are strong, but because you are learning to be faithful, not because you have arrived, but because you are willing to walk. And trust this, where your breath becomes humble, the road becomes clear. I carry my own map of scars, and I trace them without shame now, though it took me years to learn this grace. There was a time when I hid my failures like stolen bread, when I performed holiness for an audience I imagined was keeping score. I prayed with the right words and the wrong heart. I fasted to prove my devotion while my soul starved for honesty. I bowed in the mosque while my mind raced with schemes and comparisons, wondering if God was impressed, wondering if I had done enough to earn what could never be earned. And then I met Shams, and he looked at me with eyes that saw through every performance, every polished phrase, every carefully constructed identity, and he asked me a question that shattered my world. Who are you when no one is watching? I had no answer. I had spent so long being who I thought I should be that I had forgotten who I actually was. The wound of that question opened me like a pomegranate, and all my seeds spilled out raw and real and messy. And in that mess, in that humiliation, in that absolute collapse of my false self, I found the beginning of my true self. I found the place where God had been waiting all along. Let me ask you something, and I ask you to be honest with me and with yourself. What are you carrying that you think disqualifies you from love? What mistake, what failure, what secret shame sits in your chest like a stone, convincing you that you are too broken to be held by God? I know you have heard the voices. I know you have replayed the moment 1,000 times, the moment you fell, the moment you failed, the moment you chose the easier path and regretted it the next morning. I know because I have been there. I have returned to old habits I swore I had buried. I have broken promises to myself and to God. I have woken in the middle of the night with my heart pounding, drowning in the shame of what I have done or failed to do. And I have learned this. Your wound does not disqualify you. Your wound is the crack where the light gets in. If this touches something real inside you, if you recognize this struggle, write in the comments, I am learning to forgive myself. When you share this, you are not just freeing yourself. You are lighting a candle for someone still walking in darkness, someone who needs to know they are not alone in their stumbling, someone who needs permission to be human on the path to the divine. Your courage to speak truth may be exactly what another soul needs to hear today. So write it. Let it be your first small act of defiance against the shame that has kept you silent. I want to tell you about a night that changed everything for me. It was after Shams left, after I had exhausted myself searching for him in every corner of the empire, after I had raged at God and bargained and begged and finally collapsed into silence. I was alone in my room, and I felt the full weight of my humanity press down on me like a mountain. I was not a saint. I was not a mystic. I was a man who had lost his teacher and his way, a man who had wasted years posturing as spiritual while avoiding the actual surgery of transformation. I felt like a fraud. I felt like a failure. And in that moment of absolute despair, something remarkable happened. I stopped trying to be anything other than what I was. I stopped performing. I stopped pretending. I simply sat there in my brokenness and let myself be seen by God exactly as I was, confused, angry, grieving, lost. And in that raw honesty, I felt a presence that I had never felt in all my years of perfect prayers and scholarly debates. I felt God not as a judge but as a companion, not as a distant Lord but as an intimate friend, not as someone who demanded my perfection, but as someone who cherished my humanity. The wound I thought would destroy me became the doorway through which love could finally enter. The fall I feared became the ground on which I could finally stand without pretense. Here is what I learned in that night and in the nights that followed. God does not need your performance. God needs your presence. You do not have to arrive at prayer with clean hands and a calm heart. You can arrive with dirty hands and a broken heart, and you will be received. You can arrive with doubt and anger and confusion, and you will be held. You can arrive having fallen 100 times, and you will be lifted. This is the truth that contradicts everything the world teaches you. Your weakness is not an obstacle to God's love. Your weakness is the doorway. Your wound is not evidence of your failure. Your wound is evidence that you are alive, that you have dared to love and lose, that you have tried and fallen and gotten up again. The pain you carry is not a punishment. It is a teacher. It is showing you where you still believe lies about yourself, where you still think you have to earn what is already yours, where you still imagine that God's love is conditional on your perfection. And when you finally stop running from your pain, when you turn and face it with honest eyes, you will find that it has been trying to lead you home all along. I practiced something simple that helped me walk through this darkness, and I offer it to you now. Every morning, before the day begins its demands, I took a small notebook and I wrote 3 sentences. The first sentence began with, "Yesterday I struggled with," and I named the struggle honestly. The addiction that returned, the anger that erupted, the envy that poisoned my peace. I did not decorate it. I did not excuse it. I simply named it. The second sentence began with, "Today I choose," and I named one small act of faithfulness, to sit in silence for 3 minutes, to speak kindly to the person who irritates me, to serve without expecting recognition. The third sentence was simply, "God, I trust you with my mess." That was all. No eloquent prayers, no spiritual gymnastics, just honesty and intention and trust. And slowly, over weeks and months, I watched the pattern shift. The struggles did not vanish, but they lost their power to define me. The wounds did not disappear, but they became teachers instead of tormentors. I began to see my past not as a prison, but as a path, not as evidence against me, but as the curriculum through which God was shaping me into someone capable of real love. Let me give you a truth to carry like a candle through the dark. The wound that teaches is holier than the comfort that numbs. You can spend your whole life avoiding pain, building walls against vulnerability, performing strength you do not feel. Or you can turn and face your wound with the tender curiosity of a healer, asking it what it has come to teach you, asking it what door it has come to open. I chose the second path, and it was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. I learned that my addiction was teaching me about the hunger for transcendence I had been trying to satisfy in all the wrong places. I learned that my anger was teaching me about the boundaries I had failed to honor, the truth I had swallowed to keep the peace. I learned that my grief was teaching me about the depth of my capacity to love, the proof that my heart was not dead, but devastatingly alive. Every wound became a window, every scar became a map, and the past that once haunted me became the foundation on which I built a future rooted in humility and hope. So do not run from your history. Do not sanitize your story. Bring it all into the light, every shameful chapter, every regretted decision, every broken promise. Lay it before God and say, "This is who I am. This is what I have done. I am not asking you to pretend I am perfect. I am asking you to love me as I am and transform me as I walk, and watch what happens when you stop hiding. Watch how the shame loses its grip when you name it. Watch how the wound begins to heal when you stop pretending it does not exist. This is the path I walked, and I am still walking it, one honest step at a time. There was a night when my words would not rise, when the prayer I had spoken 1,000 times felt like stones in my mouth, when the mat beneath my knees felt like the edge of an abyss, and I could not tell if I was kneeling in faith or in terror. I had built my life on certainty. I was a scholar of law, a teacher of theology, a man who knew the correct answer to every spiritual question. I had categories for God, explanations for suffering, formulas for righteousness. And then Shams arrived and asked me questions that had no answers, questions that dissolved my certainties like salt in water, questions that left me naked and trembling in the presence of a mystery I could not control. Where is God when you cannot feel Him? What is prayer when the words ring hollow? Who are you when everything you thought defined you falls away? I had no answers. For the first time in my life, I had no answers. And the terror of that unknowing nearly broke me. I stood at the edge of my understanding and looked down into a darkness that seemed infinite. And I thought, this is the end. I am finished. I have lost my way, and I will never find it again. But I was wrong. It was not the end. It was the beginning. The fall was not my destruction. It was my initiation. Let me tell you what I mean by the inner fall, because this is the most important descent you will ever make, and no one prepares you for it. The inner fall is the moment when all your strategies collapse, when all your explanations fail, when all your spiritual techniques and religious practices and self-improvement plans prove themselves powerless against the actual weight of your life. It is the moment when you finally admit, really admit, not as a theological concept, but as a lived reality. I do not know. I cannot do this. I am lost. For some of you, this moment came when the person you loved most in the world died, and no amount of prayer brought them back. For some of you, it came when the addiction you swore you had defeated returned stronger than before, and you found yourself right back where you started, staring at the same poison that has destroyed you again and again. For some of you, it came when the job ended. The aid. Money ran out, the family turned their backs, and you realized that the safety you thought was solid was actually made of paper. And now the rain has come. For some of you, it is happening right now in this very moment, as you listen to these words and feel the truth of your own helplessness pressing against your chest like a hand. And I am here to tell you, do not run from this fall. Do not distract yourself from it. Do not medicate it or spiritualize it or pretend it is not happening. This fall is holy. This fall is the doorway. This fall is where your real life begins. I remember the night I reached my own edge. I was in my study, surrounded by books that suddenly felt like monuments to my arrogance. I had studied religion the way a man studies a map, believing that if I memorized the route, I would never get lost. But I was lost, desperately lost, and the map was useless because I was not crossing a landscape. I was crossing an ocean, and the ocean had no landmarks, no guarantees, no solid ground. I fell to my knees and I wept, not the dignified tears of spiritual contemplation, but the ugly, desperate tears of a man who has finally run out of pretense. I cried like a child who has lost his mother in a crowd. I cried like a man who has just realized he has been running in the wrong direction his entire life. And in that crying, in that absolute surrender, something shifted. I stopped asking God for answers. I stopped bargaining. I stopped performing. I simply fell. And as I fell, I felt arms catch me. Not physical arms, not even a sensation I could describe in any language I knew, but a presence. A certainty deeper than thought, a love that did not need my strength or my wisdom or my perfect theology. A love that met me at the bottom of my fall and said, "Now we can begin." If these words are touching something deep in you, if you feel this conversation is for your soul, subscribe to this channel. Here I share teachings for those seeking truth, transformation, and the awakening of the heart. Activate the bell so my words continue reaching you, so you do not have to walk this path alone, so you can remember when the night is darkest that there are others walking beside you, breathing the same prayer, falling and rising and falling and rising again. Here is the spiritual paradox that will save your life if you let it sink all the way to your bones. The fall is not failure. The fall is the ground. You have been afraid of falling because you thought falling meant losing, meant proving all your worst fears about yourself true, meant confirming that you are as broken and hopeless as the voice in your head keeps insisting. But I am telling you, from the other side of my own fall, that the fall is not the disaster. The pretense is the disaster. The exhausting performance of having it all together is the disaster. The refusal to admit your need is the disaster. The fall is what happens when you finally stop climbing the ladder of your own ego and let yourself land in the arms of grace. The fall is what happens when you stop trying to be God and start trusting God. The fall is the moment when the false self dies and the true self can finally breathe. And yes, it is terrifying. Yes, it feels like annihilation. Yes, every instinct you have will scream at you to grab for control, to fix it, to climb back up to the place of certainty and competence and respectable spirituality. But if you can resist that instinct, if you can stay with the fall, if you can let yourself land fully in the not knowing, you will discover something that no theology can teach you. You are held. You have always been held. You were never as alone as you thought you were. God was never waiting for you to get your act together before showing up. God was in the fall all along, catching you, teaching you, stripping away every false thing so that the real thing, the true thing, the eternal thing in you could finally emerge. I learned a practice in my falling that I still use today. When the panic comes, when the mind starts its spiral of catastrophic predictions and self-condemnation, I place both hands flat on the ground or on my chest or on the nearest solid surface, and I say aloud, I am here. I am held. God is present. I say it slowly. I say it as many times as I need to say it until my breathing slows and my heart remembers that this moment, this very ordinary moment of being alive in a body on a planet spinning through space, is itself a miracle of sustaining grace. I do not have to know what happens next. I do not have to solve every problem tonight. I do not have to become enlightened in the next 5 minutes. I only have to be here, honestly and fully here, in whatever state I find myself, trusting that the ground beneath me is not emptiness, but the very lap of God. And then I do one small concrete thing. I wash my face. I drink a glass of water. I open the window and feel the air on my skin. I write one sentence of gratitude for something so simple it seems ridiculous to mention. I had breath this morning. The sun came up. Someone smiled at me. These tiny acts of presence are not distractions from the spiritual path. They are the spiritual path. They are how you practice faith when faith feels impossible. They are how you stay tethered to reality when your mind wants to spiral into panic or despair. They are how you honor the body that God gave you as the temple in which this transformation happens. Let me give you a truth that I learned in my darkest hour. Weakness is not obstacle, but doorway. The world will tell you to hide your weakness, to overcome it, to transcend it, to fake strength until you feel it. But I am telling you the opposite. Bring your weakness into the light. Confess it to God and to yourself. Say the words you have been too afraid to say. I am scared. I am exhausted. I do not know what to do. I'm not strong enough for this. And then wait. Wait in that honesty. Do not rush to fix it or resolve it or dress it up in spiritual language. Just let it be true. Let yourself be weak. Let yourself need help. Let yourself be human in the presence of a God who became human to show you that humanity is not the problem. Pride is the problem. Pretense is the problem. The refusal to need is the problem. But your weakness, your actual vulnerable human weakness, is the place where grace can finally enter. It is the crack in the wall of your self-sufficiency. It is the door you did not even know you had locked. And when you open it, when you finally stop defending against your own fragility, you will find that the love you have been seeking was waiting on the other side all along, patient and sure and absolutely unshakable. Here is the turning, and it is simpler than you imagine and harder than you want it to be. After the fall, after the stripping away of illusions, after the night of honest tears, comes the morning of small fidelities. This is where most people turn back. They want the dramatic transformation, the lightning bolt of enlightenment, the sudden healing that requires no daily effort. But I learned something in the years after Shams left, in the years when I had to build a life from the ruins of my certainties. Faith is not a feeling. Faith is staying. Faith is the decision to show up again today, even when yesterday brought no visible reward. Faith is the unglamorous work of tending the garden of your soul one small act at a time, trusting that the harvest will come not because you forced it, but because you were faithful to the season of planting. This is the discipline of the heart, and it is not punishment, it is love made visible. It is how the invisible world of your longing takes form in the visible world of your days. Let me tell you what I mean by discipline, because the word has been twisted into something harsh and joyless, something that smells of duty and deprivation. But true discipline is not the enemy of freedom, it is the foundation of freedom. True discipline is not rigidity, it is rhythm. It is the way a river stays within its banks, not as a prison, but as the very shape that allows it to flow with power toward the sea. When I lost Shams, when I was drowning in grief and confusion, I had a choice. I could abandon myself to chaos, letting every impulse and mood dictate my days, or I could create a structure gentle enough to hold me as I healed and strong enough to keep me from scattering into fragments. I chose the latter, and it saved my life. Every morning I rose before dawn, not because I felt inspired, but because I had decided that this is what I would do. I washed my face in cold water, feeling the shock of it wake my skin. I rolled out my prayer mat, and I sat. Some mornings the prayer flowed like honey. Most mornings it felt like pushing stones uphill, but I stayed. I breathed. I waited. And slowly, over months of these small mornings, I noticed something shifting. The chaos in my mind began to settle. The panic in my chest began to ease. I was not fixed. I was not enlightened, but I was held. I was held by the rhythm I had chosen, by the promise I kept to myself and to God, by the daily practice of returning no matter how I felt. Here is what I am offering you, and I am offering it not as theory, but as the map I drew from my own wandering. 3 small practices that you can begin today. Practices so simple you might dismiss them, practices so ordinary they contain no glamour, and yet practices powerful enough to rebuild a life. First, conscious silence. Every morning or at the first hour you can reasonably keep, find 3 minutes. Set them apart as holy time. Sit in a chair or on the floor. Place your hand over your heart. Close your eyes. Breathe gently and deliberately. Count 4 beats as you inhale. Hold for 1 beat. Count 6 beats as you exhale. Do this without trying to achieve anything, without straining for peace or insight or transformation. Simply breathe and notice that you are breathing. Notice that your heart is beating. Notice that God is present in this breath, this beat, this moment. Do not underestimate the power of this practice. It seems like nothing. It is everything. It is the thread that will keep you tethered to reality when your mind wants to spiral. It is the anchor that will hold you steady when the storms come. It is the way you learn to come home to yourself, to this body, to this breath, to this irreplaceable moment that is your life. Second, small daily order. Choose one act so small it seems almost embarrassing to call it a practice, and commit to keeping it. Make your bed every morning, slowly and with care, as if you are making an altar. Or wash your dishes immediately after eating, as if you are performing a prayer. Or write one honest sentence in a notebook before you sleep, naming one thing you noticed or learned or felt that day. Order the visible world, and your inner room will hear the command. This is not about being perfect or impressive. This is about teaching your soul that you are capable of keeping a promise, that your word to yourself matters, that you can be trusted to do today what you said you would do today. And as you practice this small faithfulness in the external world, something begins to shift in the internal world. The chaos you feel inside begins to find its own order, not because you forced it, but because you demonstrated to your deeper self that order is possible, that you are not helpless, that there is solid ground beneath your feet. The soul learns by example. Show it the way. Third, service or gratitude. Every day, offer one concrete gesture that costs you something small. Send a message of genuine blessing to someone who does not expect it. Bring a cup of water to someone who is thirsty. Complete a quiet task that nobody will praise. Do it as an offering to God who sees what humans miss. Or if service feels too much today, then practice gratitude. Write down 3 specific things, however small, and thank God without hurry. Not generic thanks, but particular thanks. I am grateful for the sunlight that fell across the floor this morning. I am grateful that I had bread to eat. I am grateful that my body carried me through another day even though I did not thank it. This is not positive thinking. This is reality training. This is teaching your eyes to see the abundance that is already here, the provision that has never stopped flowing, the grace that has held you every moment even when you were too distracted or despairing to notice. Love becomes credible when it takes a body. Faith becomes real when it leaves the realm of emotion and enters the realm of action. These 3 practices are how you incarnate your longing for transformation. These 3 practices are how you cooperate with the work God is already doing in you. I follow these steps not because I am strong, but because I know how easily I wander. The heart is a wild garden. Without attention, it grows weeds faster than flowers. Without tending it, becomes a place of thorns and chaos. But with gentle, consistent care, with the small daily acts of devotion, it becomes a place where beauty can take root, where peace can bloom, where God can walk in the cool of the evening and find you waiting. Discipline is the fence that protects this garden, not to imprison you, but to create the conditions in which you can flourish, not to restrict you, but to give you the structure within which true freedom becomes possible. I learned this the hard way. I learned it by years of trying to will myself into holiness, by dramatic vows that lasted a week, and spectacular failures that left me more discouraged than before. I learned it by finally accepting that transformation is not a single heroic act, but 1,000 small, faithful acts, repeated day after day, in sun and rain, in inspiration and in drudgery, until slowly, so slowly you almost miss it, the person you are becomes the person you were always meant to be. Here is the truth I want you to carry like a lamp through the dark. The soul grows by constancy, not spectacle. This contradicts everything our culture teaches. We are trained to believe in the quick fix, the breakthrough moment, the sudden reversal of fortune. And sometimes those moments come, but they are rare, and they are meaningless unless they land on ground that has been prepared by months and years of small fidelities. The spectacular moment is the flower. The hidden root system of daily practice is what makes the flower possible. So do not despise the smallness of these practices. Do not wait for motivation or inspiration to strike. Do not put off beginning until you feel ready or certain or spiritually mature enough. Begin today. Begin now. Begin with 3 minutes of breath, with making your bed, with writing one true sentence. Begin messy and uncertain and doubtful. But begin. And then begin again tomorrow, and the day after, and the day after that. Not because you are chasing perfection, but because you are choosing presence. Not because you have to, but because you get to. This is your life. This is your one irreplaceable existence, and God has placed within you everything you need to live it with dignity and purpose and peace. All you have to do is stay. Keep it simple. Keep it today. Keep it gently. The harvest will come. Constancy does what impulse cannot. This is the secret the impatient will never learn, and it is the treasure the faithful inherit slowly. Like dawn coming to a dark room, so gradually you do not notice the exact moment when you can finally see. After weeks of those small morning practices, after days of keeping promises so small they seemed meaningless, I began to notice something shifting in me. Not a dramatic reversal, not a bolt of lightning that changed everything in an instant, but a softening, a settling, a quiet coherence where there had been only noise. I sat for my 3 minutes of silence, and the silence no longer felt hostile. I made my bed, and the act became a meditation instead of a chore. I wrote my gratitude, and the words came easier, as if my eyes were learning a new way of seeing. The transformation was happening not in some elevated spiritual realm, but in the ordinary texture of my days. The way I responded when someone interrupted me, the way I carried my body through the afternoon, the way I met my own reflection in the window at dusk and felt something softer than the old familiar contempt. I was not becoming someone else. I was becoming myself, and I was doing it 3 minutes at a time. Let me tell you about the signs, because you are looking for them and you might be missing them, because you are looking in the wrong direction. You are waiting for the miracle, the burning bush, the angel descending with a message written in flames. And sometimes God speaks that way, but most of the time God speaks in coherence, in small alignments, in doors that open quietly, in conversations that arrive at the exact hour you need them. In the way a task you have been dreading becomes bearable, even beautiful, when you offer it as prayer instead of resisting it as burden. The signs are not fireworks. The signs are the way your inner world and your outer world begin to move in the same direction, like a river finding its course, like a breath that fills the lungs without effort. I saw this happening in my own life after months of the morning practice. A student appeared who asked the exact question I needed to hear myself answer. A passage from Scripture opened itself to me in a way it never had before, and I saw my own story written in the ancient words. Money came, and it came clean, aligned with service, free of the grasping fever that had once driven me. A relationship that had been poisoned by resentment began to breathe again when I stopped demanding that the other person change, and instead changed the way I showed up. The same people, the same circumstances, but I was different, and so the world I inhabited was different. I whispered to myself in those days, as if I were teaching a child who needed to hear the truth again and again until it sank deep enough to take root. When I ordered my soul, my life also found its order. I kept returning to the lesson I had spent years avoiding. Silence was my teacher. Not silence as absence, but silence as presence. Not silence as void, but silence as the womb in which the new self could gestate. I learned to trust the silence more than the noise. I learned to trust the small, faithful act more than the dramatic gesture. I learned to trust the rhythm more than the peak experience. And slowly, in ways I could not have engineered or predicted, my life began to reflect the inner alignment I was practicing. This is not magic. This is how creation works. This is the law written into the fabric of reality. As within, so without. As you sow, so you reap. As you practice, so you become. The river did not change its course. I stopped fighting the current. I stopped swimming upstream against the nature of things. I aligned myself with the flow of grace, and suddenly I was being carried instead of drowning. Before any important decision now, before I speak a word that matters or take a step that will shape my future, I stop. I breathe 3 slow cycles, deep and deliberate, and I ask myself one question. Is this rooted in peace or panic? Is this impulse coming from the still center where God dwells, or is it coming from the frightened ego that believes it must control everything to survive? And I wait for the answer. I do not rush. I do not let the urgency of the external world dictate the pace of my internal discernment. I breathe, I listen, and when I feel the peace, even if it is a peace that makes no logical sense, even if it is a peace that points me toward the smaller step or the harder road, I act from that peace. And every time I do this, every single time I choose the path of peace over the path of panic, I watch the fruit ripen. Not immediately, not always visibly, but steadily. The decision made in peace leads to a result marked by peace. The word spoken from the still center lands in the right soil. The action taken without grasping opens doors I did not even know existed. This is the practice that transforms decision-making from a source of anxiety into a form of prayer. This is the practice that taught me to trust the guidance that comes not in words, but in the quality of presence I feel when I consider a particular path. Let me give you something to carry forward, a truth that emerged from my own years of practice and failure, and practice again. Desire is not the enemy. Panic is the enemy. Wanting is not the problem. Grasping is the problem. You are allowed to long for change, for provision, for healing, for love. God placed those longings in you. They are holy. But when desire becomes panic, when longing becomes grasping, when hope becomes desperation, you cut yourself off from the very current that could carry you toward what you seek. The difference is subtle but essential. Desire that is rooted in peace says, I want this, and I trust that if it is meant for me, it will come in the right time, and if it is not meant for me, then something better is already on its way. Desire that is rooted in panic says, I must have this now, and if I do not get it, I will be destroyed, and I cannot rest until I force it into being. One is a sail that catches the wind. One is an anchor that drags the bottom. Learn to feel the difference in your body. Peaceful desire feels like an opening, like an exhale. Panic desire feels like a clenching, like holding your breath. And whenever you notice the panic rising, come back to the breath. 3 slow cycles, hand on heart. Is this peace or panic? And then act from peace, even if the action is to wait, even if the action is to do nothing at all but trust. I watched my life transform, not because I became perfect, but because I became consistent. Not because I achieved some elevated state of consciousness, but because I practiced simple presence. Not because I transcended my humanity, but because I embraced it with compassion. The mornings I did not want to sit in silence, I sat anyway. The days I felt no gratitude, I wrote it anyway. The moments I wanted to react in anger or fear, I paused and breathed anyway. And gradually, so gradually it was almost imperceptible, the person I was becoming and the life I was living began to align. The gap between my values and my actions began to close. The distance between who I wanted to be and who I actually was began to shrink. I was not arriving at some finish line. I was walking a path that had no end, only deeper and deeper integration, only more and more moments of alignment, only a growing capacity to meet life as it is instead of as I wish it were. And in that alignment, in that growing capacity for presence, I found something I had been seeking my entire life, peace that does not depend on circumstances, joy that does not require perfection, love that does not demand control. Here is the mantra I offer you for today, words to repeat when the doubt comes and the old patterns call you back. I practice small holiness and let God magnify it. You do not have to be great. You do not have to achieve miracles. You do not have to impress anyone, including yourself. You only have to be faithful in the small things, the unremarkable things, the things nobody sees but God. Make your bed. Breathe your 3 minutes. Write your gratitude. Speak your truth. Serve without applause. And trust that these small seeds you are planting in the dark soil of daily life are taking root, are growing in ways you cannot yet see, are preparing a harvest you cannot yet imagine. The fruit of peace ripens without noise. The tree of transformation grows in silence. All you have to do is water it with your small fidelities and trust the season. Now I stand in the same world, but my footing is different. I walk the same streets of Kanya, but I see them with different eyes. The merchant calls the same greeting. The muezzin sings the same prayer. The sun rises and sets as it always has. But I am not who I was. I am grateful. I'm awake without rushing. The pain that once controlled me now walks beside me like an old teacher who has finished the lesson but stays close in case I need reminding. The grief that once defined me now rests in a corner of my heart, honored but not ruling. I learned the grammar of mercy, and it is simpler than I imagined. Breathe, stay, serve, give thanks. 4 words that contain the whole path. 4 practices that rebuild a life. 4 ordinary actions that become extraordinary when you do them with presence, with faith, with the quiet determination to keep showing up even when you cannot see the destination. I am not healed in the way I once imagined healing. I am whole in a way I could not have designed. I am complete not because I have no wounds, but because I have learned to carry them without letting them carry me. Here's what I have learned, and I offer it to you, not as one who has arrived, but as one who is still walking, still learning, still falling and rising and falling and rising, but walking in a direction that feels increasingly like home. Pain refines. This is not a comfortable truth, but it is a true truth. The suffering you are moving through is not random. It is not meaningless. It is not evidence that God has abandoned you or that you have failed some cosmic test. It is the kiln in which the false self burns away and the true self is forged. It is the crucible in which your scattered attention is focused into clarity, your vague longing is shaped into purpose, your borrowed beliefs are tested until only what is real remains. I do not say this to romanticize your pain. I do not tell you to be grateful for suffering as if it were a gift you asked for. I tell you this so you can stop wasting your suffering. So you can stop resisting it so violently that you miss the transformation it is working in you. So you can turn toward it with courage and curiosity and ask, what are you teaching me? What door are you opening? What am I becoming through this fire? Silence instructs. This is the second lesson, and it contradicts every impulse of our noisy age. We fill every gap with sound, with entertainment, with busyness, with anything that keeps us from hearing the truth that silence would speak. But silence is not emptiness. Silence is not the absence of God. Silence is the presence of God without our interference. In the silence, the distractions fall away. In the silence, the false urgencies lose their power. In the silence, you remember who you are beneath all the roles you perform and all the masks you wear and all the stories you tell about yourself to survive. I learned this in the months after Shams disappeared, when the only voice I could trust was the one I met in the silent hours before dawn. That voice did not shout. It did not give me a 10-point plan. It simply breathed with me, and in that breathing I found the strength to take the next step, and then the next, and then the next. The silence was my teacher when every human voice offered advice I could not use. The silence was my guide when the maps all led to dead ends. The silence was my companion when I thought I was utterly alone. And it is still teaching me. Every morning, every breath, every moment I remember to stop and listen beneath the noise. God never moves away. We move, and then we learn to return. This is the third lesson, and it is the one that saves me again and again when I forget everything else. There is no distance you can travel that places you beyond the reach of love. There is no sin you can commit that disqualifies you from grace. There is no failure you can suffer that cancels your belonging. You are not trying to earn God's attention. You already have it. You are not trying to become worthy of God's love. You already are. The problem has never been God's willingness to receive you. The problem has always been your willingness to receive yourself, to come home to your own heart, to stop running from your own truth. God is here, right here, in this moment, in this breath, in the warmth of the sun on your skin, in the beat of your heart, in the very fact that you are alive and listening to these words. God has never left. You left. You wandered into the far country of your own fear and shame and distraction. And now you are learning to return. Not by traveling some great distance, but by stopping, by breathing, by placing your hand on your heart and saying, I am here. I am home. I am held. Discipline is not punishment. It is the doorway back to love. This is the fourth lesson, and it is the most misunderstood. We think discipline is what harsh parents impose on misbehaving children. We think it is restriction and deprivation and joyless duty. But true discipline, the discipline of the heart, is how you love yourself into wholeness. It is how you keep the promises that matter. It is how you create the conditions in which you can flourish. When I wake early to sit in silence, I am not punishing my body. I am honoring it with the gift of stillness. When I make my bed with care, I am not performing drudgery. I am creating order in my external world so my internal world can find its peace. When I serve without recognition, I am not diminishing myself. I am practicing love in its most potent form, love that does not need applause to be real. Discipline is the architecture of freedom. Discipline is the way you build a life that can hold your dreams. Discipline is the love you show yourself when emotions are unreliable and circumstances are unstable. It is the practice of returning again and again to the center, to the breath, to the simple, faithful act that keeps you tethered to truth. If you doubt yourself today, borrow my certainty. I have walked this path long enough to know that the voice of doubt is loud, but it is not true. You are more than your worst hour. You are more than the mistakes you made yesterday or last year or a decade ago. You are more than the numbers in your bank account, more than the opinions of people who stopped believing in you, more than the resume you present to the world or the image you maintain on the surface. You are the image of God. You are beloved. You are seen. You are held. You are called. And you are capable of transformation, not because you are exceptional, but because you are human. And transformation is the birthright of every human who chooses to walk the path of awareness, who chooses to stay present even when presence is painful, who chooses to practice love even when love feels impossible. I have seen this transformation in my own life. I have seen it in the lives of students who came to me broken and left whole. I have seen it in the way grace works when we finally stop resisting it. And I see it available to you right now, in this very moment, if you will just take the first small step. An original truth rises in me like dawn, and I give it to you as a lamp for your path, where the breath becomes humble, the road becomes clear. This is not a formula. This is an observation drawn from years of practice. When you stop striving and start breathing, when you stop forcing and start trusting, when you stop performing and start being, the way forward reveals itself. Not always immediately. Not always obviously, but steadily. The humble breath is the breath that does not demand answers. The humble breath is the breath that simply receives the gift of life, moment by moment, without grasping or rejecting. The humble breath is the breath that says, I do not know what comes next, but I know I am alive right now, and that is enough. And from that humble breath, from that simple willingness to be present without control, the road emerges. Not the road you planned, not the road you would have chosen, but the road that is actually yours, the road that leads you home. If this message resonated in your soul, if you felt these words touching something true and deep in you, subscribe to this channel and be part of this awakening journey. Each week I bring wisdom for those who chose the path of true transformation, for those who are willing to do the work of presence, for those who refuse to settle for a life of distraction and numbness. We are a community of pilgrims walking the same road, falling and rising together, breathing the same prayer of return. And I want you to do one more thing. Leave in the comments these words: I am breathing my way home. This simple declaration marks the beginning of your journey back to yourself, back to God, back to the life you were always meant to live. When you write these words, you are making a promise. You are planting a seed. You are joining a lineage of seekers who have discovered that the path to peace runs through presence, that the doorway to God opens through the humble breath. The transformation is not a distant miracle, but a daily practice. Write it, say it, mean it, and then live it, one breath at a time, one day at a time, one small, faithful act at a time, until the person you are becoming is finally the person you have always been.